Thank you very much for the introduction. Nice to meet all of the panel members. Nice to meet you again, Eric. Nice to see a nice distribution of people here. I know there's an interesting panel also happening at the same time as ours. This has been a wonderful conference, my second time here. I was here a couple years ago presenting on what this project is hopefully going to look like, so it's nice to come back a couple years later and present on some of our findings. Okay, so this is a little bit of an intro to some of the things I'm going to be unpacking in this presentation. The project that I'm going to be speaking about is primarily about adherence to HIV meds from a qualitative perspective, obviously, as a medical anthropologist. So that's why we're going to be talking about adherence quite a lot. So biomedical approaches to adherence often pay insufficient attention to sociocultural context in shaping the individual and structural factors that produce localized experiences related to taking HIV meds. Among social science researchers, body mapping has emerged as a powerful, participant-driven, arts-based method to more fully understand the conditions of life that inform adherence and other aspects of living with HIV. So this presentation demonstrates the strength of this methodology to expand our understandings of adherence among HIV-positive gay men. Adherence not only is an aspect of HIV management and/or resistance to dominant forms of biomedical disease management, but also as a deeply personal and embodied set of experiences. So I'm going to be sort of giving an overview, dominant approaches to looking at adherence, some of the gaps in literature and practice, something entirely different, our project, which is referred to as the Anatomy of Adherence Project. And then I'm going to be unpacking our body mapping data that we gathered with gay men recently in London. So in terms of some of the dominant approaches to HAART, how it's conceived and framed, now these are sort of some general comments. It's a bit of a critique of dominant biomedical approaches. So in terms of dominant approaches to understanding HAART, measuring it with respect to adherence, it's often framed in relation to the degree to which people follow prescribed medical advice. And there's often a focus on individual level behavior and also psychosocial determinants of health. And there are certain kinds of merits and values associated with adherence. Good adherence is typically framed in terms of whether or not the patient takes 95% of his or her medical doses on a regular basis. Bad adherence or non-compliance is often understood as a negative behavior linked with poor decision-making and or other factors like clients having chaotic or out-of-control lives. In terms of the methodologies used to understand adherence, from a dominant kind of biomedical framework, again, there's a lot of focus on quantitative measures, population-specific initiatives, often with high-risk groups, very epidemiologically driven. So in terms of some of the specific methods, things like surveys, self-reporting, mHealth has also emerged, in particular in the international setting. Also seeking testing, treating, and retaining, so the idea of treatment as prevention. So from the perspective of myself, some of the other folks on the team, some gaps in research and service delivery. So there's a real emphasis on clinical markers in terms of understanding adherence, right? Viral loads, CD4 counts, all those kinds of things. The focus also on quantitative data and research, which may fail to recognize the role of structural factors in producing adherence and non-adherence, and things that lie in between those two very polemic kind of ways of thinking about something as complicated as taking this medication. From our perspective, there's a real need for in-depth qualitative research to capture the array of issues linked with adherence, which includes ideas about gender, the body, and lived realities associated with HAART. So those setting up some of those gaps in existing research informed how we wanted to approach adherence, with the primacy of looking at gender and the body a little bit differently than what had been done before. So we looked at different groups of individuals. We wanted to have three distinct groups, MSM, women as well as trans individuals. And the bulk of this research took place in Vancouver. However, I live in London, so it was kind of difficult to manage a project being many thousands of miles away. So we did a lot of the data collection here in Vancouver with women. We were unable to include trans populations, unfortunately. And we did the MSM research in London, so it's kind of a two-city kind of project. And actually, the body mapping with the women that was done here in Vancouver was done here at Harbour Centre. So the space still had meaning for me. So recognizing the importance of not just those who take meds and who are sort of very much under surveillance, but also we thought it was important to gather the perspectives of service providers, who work with clients who also want to find ways to increase and better understand adherence-related behaviors. So we also included providers in our project. So with respect to theoretical framings, how we were looking at our methodology as well as understanding complex kinds of behaviors associated with adherence across our different populations, we drew upon ideas related to intersectionality and critical medical anthropology. So the focus was on understanding the relationships between different subjectivities and culturally constructed categories, things like gender, race, sexuality, power, also poverty, in the production of inequalities among marginalized populations. And from our perspective, these were useful kinds of ways of understanding adherence beyond sort of compliance and non-compliance. No one really lives in the black and white world, so what's happening in the middle? And this kind of theoretical approach also, I think, can sort of help us unpack some of the hidden powers of adherence to act as a technique to manage and govern the health of vulnerable populations. So this slide shows sort of all of the methodologies that we used in the study in general. I'm going to be focusing on the two asterisk items. But as I mentioned, we didn't just focus on interviewing and doing body mapping with women and men. We also did interview with a range of providers. And in terms of the body mapping, we did with women and men, 4-day workshops. And we also did follow-up interviews with both of those groups. And we created booklets, which I brought with me today. The women's booklet and the men's booklet. And they each have the maps. And then each of the participants created a 1-page story that could be used to describe their map if they didn't happen to be there. And this is a standard practice because in body mapping research, which I'll get to in a second, you might be wondering what is body mapping. In body mapping research, there's a huge focus on community participation, community display of the maps. So the 1-page stories that are included in here are often placed right beside the actual map. So the participant's story can be used to explain his or her map. In terms of some of the community display events that we had with the women, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the women's pharmacy in the downtown east side. Yeah, okay, so I think the maps, they may still be there. They were there, they were put up last December. And then we also had a community event at the Potluck Cafe. Potluck Cafe last December. We had all the women there. We had the maps displayed, it was catered. So that was a really nice way to bring that part of the project to an end. And with the men's maps, they have been displayed at the annual general meeting of our community partner in London, which is the Regional HIV/AIDS Connection. And they're also going to be displayed at the annual AIDS Vigil in December. I'll pass these around and we'll be at the end. So what is body mapping? It's a unique arts-based approach to research that combines visual arts, written words, narratives, as well as therapeutic process. Participants use art to communicate aspects of their lives and experiences through their own form of expression. So it's a 4-day workshop led by a trained facilitator, who's Tricia Smith. She's one of the authors on this presentation. It's usually done in small groups, about, between 5 and 10. We had 6 women and 5 men in our body mapping groups, which was just enough. So over 4 days, body mapping emerged in South Africa, and Tricia was trained by one of the forerunners of the methodology. And there's a bit of a guidebook. There's about 16 or 17 exercises that make up a complete body mapping workshop. And so over the course of the 4 days, each day the participants do about 3 to 4 exercises per day. And there's a series of questions, and the participants respond to those questions through art. So they have these big, huge 6-foot pieces of paper. There's the primary medium is paint. So there's a whole range of colors of paint. There's markers. There's a whole bunch of other things as well that the participants can use to express themselves. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what body mapping is. It's arts-based, very participant-driven. It's always led by a trained facilitator. And in both of our body mapping workshops, we always had a counselor who was well known to the different populations on hand, because as I think you can well appreciate, talking about traumatic things as well as positive things, but using the body as a vehicle of expression can bring up a lot of things, right? And so it's really important for people to know that there's someone on hand that they can go to if things start to get uncomfortable or if anything is getting really triggering. Some of the questions that are asked in the body mapping experience workshops are things like, where are they from? Where do they want to go? What would you consider a personal slogan to be related to your life living with HIV? And it's interesting, HIV doesn't enter the dialogue of the workshop officially until day 3. And that's because the first couple days are about setting up supports, getting to know each other. The groups, they may or may not know each other prior to the workshop. Ensuring that people feel comfortable and safe is really important before you start getting into HIV, because even if the people have been positive for a long, long time, it's still, a sensitive issue. So that's another interesting feature of the body mapping. So the men, quite a wide variety of ages, 27 to 58. They were primarily from London as well as or surrounding smaller towns in southern Ontario. They all self-identify as gay men. 4 of them are white, 1 man is black. Years of living with HIV varied very widely, from 3 years to 25 years. And only 3 of the men had sort of sustained experience with HIV meds. And the men were recruited with the help of a community partner who is the regional HIV/AIDS connection in London. I'm going to stand up for a sec because I think it's important to sort of unpack some of what you're seeing here. So I'll try and talk loudly, okay? I think it's worth it. I'll read the quote in a second. In terms of how you might go about reading this, they always start here, the bottom left. And the question is, where are you from? So for Billy, he drew, his mother is Tongan, his dad is white, but he drew stuff that related to his cultural heritage and identity. In the top right corner, what are your goals, aspirations? For him, it was about love, self-love, as well as love of someone else, a partner. And then his slogans are here: pray, live, love, laugh, don't give up. So those are some ways to read different aspects of the maps. So I'll read the quote because I think it's really powerful to make sure everyone hears it. So this is Billy. And it really just helped me to take a good look at myself, to see that things aren't as bad as they seem. And it helped me look at myself in a different way. I'm definitely going to put this up on my wall because I need to remind myself that, I'm a beautiful person. That's something that I accomplished. And it will show, if people look closer, they'll see that there is someone who has been through some stuff and struggled with some things, and someone who was embracing a sense of community with being HIV positive, you know? This is Eric. Usually I've done studies for like man-on-man sex or living with HIV, and it's like yes, no, and yeah, it's just painstaking. It's so boring, and it's like, fuck, can you speed it up? He was the most challenging participant I've ever dealt with in my entire life. I love him. Like, you can kind of half-read, and they don't pay as good. He brought up money a lot. How much do we get paid? Each of the men were paid $50 a day for the workshop. Any kind of transportation issues were always covered. The follow-up interview, they got $30. Paying a lot better than other kinds of things he's done before. Like, this was great, and it's a lot more personal. There was a lot more interaction with people. They just want answers. I think this has a little more facets to it. I mean, it has more. You guys are trying to get more of us out of it, which I think is really interesting. This is John, who's the oldest participant, 58. My mother always told me, you have to know where you come from and who you are. Something she forgot is, where are you going? So I was never taught that, and I think had I been taught, where are you going, my whole life may have been completely different. The body mapping made me realize I'm at a crossroads in my life, suffering from PTSD. It was so overwhelming, I felt like I really had no future. I was stuck. And the body mapping made me feel like I do have a future. This one is just out of control. Yeah, this is Martin's. It's astounding. There is a way to express that is me. But what I found is that, holy shit, there's a lot of fucking color on this. And it is real. When I look at it, I identify with it. The only hard part of it was that it brings back memories of starting meds. Yeah, rationally I could get the prescription, I could pick it up, and I could put it on the table. But to take that first, I cried. And it wasn't just because of the fear, it was just the whole recognition of where I am today. And I have to do this for life. Today I take my meds. I'm not perfect at it, yeah? But I always come back to it. I always come back to, it's part of taking care of myself. You can look at Martin's for a long, long time. So this is Rob's. He's lived with HIV the longest, for 25, 26 years. It really made me feel better. Not that I felt bad about myself, but it put things in perspective. It made me kind of look. It showed me where I've been, where I am, where I'm going, a common theme. Being able to add people and explain, like, my daughter is here, my son is up here, and my daughter is here. Well, why is Jennifer there? She's drawn in the symbolic representation of the Om on his right hand. So why is Jennifer there? Well, Jennifer was my right-hand man. That wouldn't come out in an interview with Survey Monkey. It would be cool if someone else could read it and know what it all means. Medications and pill-taking regimes mark the traumatic, yet also sometimes often positive, transitions men make as they adjust to their new identities within the world of HIV. For some men, HAART is part of their personal discourse about being healthy or practices related to self-care. But for some, it's not. Some participants use other approaches to help, like diet, exercise, condom use. And John, who's the oldest participant, said that he's a slow converter, so he's never been on meds, actually. As with their approach to HIV, which doesn't rule them, as Rob says, I'm the landlord of my own body. Neither does Adherence or HIV meds. Hopefully, this very brief presentation has demonstrated some of the really rich and powerful utility of body mapping. It's a very self-directed, personally authentic form of expression, and it allows opportunities to redefine what successful management of HAART and living with HIV will look like. Very different than biomedical or sort of dichotomized notions of compliance or non-compliance. HAART and other forms of governance within the biomedical regime do not necessarily govern or control these men. their resistance to medical governance vis-a-vis dominant approaches to HAART reveals much about the men's histories with HIV, other priorities and other aspects of life. HIV is the only thing that's going on with them, and their unique health ideologies and practices. Body mapping allows us to understand adherence as a culturally constructed set of practices that are integral to men's embodied lived experience. I'm wrapping up a little bit in a minute. The participatory, visual, and collaborative dimensions of body mapping make it a truly transformative and therapeutic research experience and approach. I often get very weepy when I talk about my body mapping style. It's very, very, very transformative for all involved. It's a very powerful conduit for the channeling of multi-leveled experiences and ideas related to self-care. There are layers and layers and layers of meaning. So multi-leveled experiences and ideas related to self-care, self-actualization, and a re-seeing of themselves. The maps are living records through which to see and understand the men's ongoing journeys with HAART, HIV, and the joys and pain of life in general. So these are some of my acknowledgements. For funders, like I said, this was kind of a joint project between me at Western and folks here at the BC Centre for Excellence in HIV/AIDS. So I want to thank our AFA team and Active Adherence team, the men in our study, first and foremost, our partners in London.